Hey there. We are between seasons right now, and I'm super excited for you to hear this episode, but I'm also really excited to talk about The Drawing of the Three. Oh, it's such a good book. If you're curious how that kind of season of the show is going to be cut up, go to radiofreemidworld.com/schedule, and you can see the division as it goes for the next 2 seasons or so. And we're here to answer any questions you might have, if you have any of them. If you want to help the show, this is an exciting time to do it. We are getting ready to start a new book. So take this episode, or take any of the episodes, or the whole show, to any of your friends who like Stephen King, or people who like The Dark Tower, or even if they just like fantasy novels, that kind of stuff, or if they want to get caught up in advance of the movie coming out later on this year. Man, we don't pay to advertise the show at all. We're here on Duckfeed.tv, but I want the audience to get bigger and bigger. And your word of mouth and going and spreading the word makes a huge difference. Tweet at your favorite famous people about it. I don't care. Maybe don't bother them, though, because, anyway, but yeah, just direct people to the show. Let's grow the family. And gosh, so grateful that people are A, willing to talk about this series with me, and B, willing to listen. This is fantastic. So let's go listen to this kind of special mid or inter-season episode, rather, and we'll be back later on with more kind of mainline Dark Tower stuff. Welcome to Radio Free Midworld, a podcast about the Dark Tower series of books. My name is Cole Ross, and I'm your host, and I'm joined today by Autumn Greer.
Delighted to be here.
And also by Zack Johnson. Hey, Zack.
Hey, Cole. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Autumn is a returning guest. Zack, this is your first time on the show. People may know Zack from the video game Hot Dog, or video games Hot Dog? Video games, because it looks like video game Shot Dog when it's all written in one place, and then I get sad. But from the Video Games Hot Dog podcast, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, I'm excited to do it.
Yeah. So here we are, we're here to talk about The Eyes of the Dragon, which is a book by Stephen King. And this is the first of our kind of mid-season break, or inter-season breaks, as we are between the main entries in the Dark Tower series. We want to kind of go and take a look at related works, because the Dark Tower kind of smeared its way into a whole bunch of different Stephen King books, and we've got a whole bunch of these planned. I want to hear your guys' kind of history with this book, because I'd never read it. I basically never heard anything about it until I saw it as a footnote. Zack, you seem pretty excited to come on here. How did you first get exposed to this?
So my dad, basically for my entire life, just bought every book that Stephen King released when it came out. So I just had a new hardbound copy of this when I was 11. And so it was probably the first Stephen King that I ever read. It was definitely the first one that I remember, and it was before I started reading the Dark Tower series. I think I didn't start with that until The Wasteland had come out. But yeah, this book has just sort of always been there as far as I know. I was surprised to find out how rare it apparently is, and there's not a Kindle version, and I don't know if that means there's no audiobook versions available, but...
I didn't look into the audiobook side of it, but yeah, this is a little bit tricky to get a hold of. There are some bootleg ebooks you can get, and the only way, the way that I got a hold of it was by just getting a used copy from Amazon. I think that it's a problem with publisher rights, something like that. Like King went through somebody different for this one. For some reason that is unknown to me. And so, it is kind of caught up in this pre-release hell on Amazon. Yeah. And boy, oh boy, am I just used to reading things on Kindle and making my highlights and taking my notes and stuff. Yeah. Autumn, how about you? You jumped on this episode pretty quick when you saw that was happening.
I did. I haven't read these books, or this book, probably since... gosh, probably the last time I read it would be the late 90s, which, if we're honest with ourselves, was a completely different century. I probably read it when I was in maybe sixth or seventh grade. I know that because of the beautiful illustrations in the hardback book. When you're in art class, when you're that age and you just draw stuff that you've seen all the time, I was always trying to recreate those in art class thinking that I was being very creative. But I was really pleased just top line rereading this book. I know listening to the past few episodes, I think a lot of people that fell in love with the Gunslinger and the Dark Tower series when they were a little bit younger, rereading it, they were like, oh, wow, there's some areas where it could be improved, or I remember this being better. And rereading this, not having read it for probably over 15 years, I was delighted with this book upon rereading it. It's a great book. Yeah,
I was kind of caught off guard, I guess, by kind of how simple this book is. And, this is my first exposure to it. Just kind of how quickly it went down, like in a way that really good Stephen King does. When he's not doing like a 1,400 page epic. I love The Stand. I love it. But like, there are definitely two different kind of modes here. And that actually stands to reason because like this was conceived of as a kid's book. In a way, like the original title was Napkins, which we're going to find out, like, strangely enough, napkins play a very key role in this. And like people got upset with King for doing
the alternate title was what? Spoilers?
Yep. Oh, no, the alternate title was His Sled Did It. But yeah, like people got really upset with King for kind of like straying away from horror fiction, and like that kind of backlash became the basis for Misery. So hey, we got two good books out of that.
Thinking about that having happened so at this point early in King's career, as it turns out, is funny because it's like, well, okay, he was sad about being pigeonholed 5 books in, and 400 books later, there was just this one little diversion, and that was okay. Yeah. Oh, he probably wrote a book about baseball or something.
I'm sure. Isn't that what Gerald's Game is about? People tell me not to read Gerald's Game.
No, that's about a woman getting tied to a bed for sex, and then her husband dies, and she's stuck there, and maybe like a wolf comes or something. I forget.
What a fun episode.
The Girl Who Loved
Tom
Gordon,
you're going to get a lot of signups for that. People just aren't going to be able to wait to talk about that.
I don't think that has any tower connection, so I think we're good.
It's hard to tell, man. Late in his career, it was hard to stop him from writing it into everything.
One thing with this book that kind of surprised me is as you're going through the book, there's different lines and things that are very reminiscent, not as much necessarily of the Dark Tower series, but I mean, you can clock some of the stuff from Misery. There's definitely some elements with the cyclical nature of Flag that really tie in with it. There's a few lines in there that are quoted at the beginning of 4 Past Midnight. I mean, it's interesting how many books that aren't necessarily Dark Tower books straight up tie into this book. It really is like a little nexus point. It's
a kid's primer for the Kingiverse. Yeah.
And it has Flag as Flag in a way that I don't even necessarily think the Gunslinger did to begin with, right? Like it seems like the Gunslinger was written without him really understanding that the Man in Black was the same character.
Yeah, so I don't think that Flag became the Man in Black, or that those two merged until like the Wolves of the Kala. Like I think that even when Flag is introduced in the Wasteland, spoilers, I guess, that doesn't matter. It's pretty far off. Even when Flag is mentioned there, I think that he was kind of envisioned as a separate person, and they were merged when he decided they were too similar. I think, is the way that it goes.
Walter was just one of his cronies to begin with, but Martin was.
Yeah. So like in the revision, Martin became Walter. Like, okay, they're the same person, and then way later on, after that, they merged again with Flag. And that's the reason why we're kind of covering this, is that this is Flag as Flag. As we see him as this kind of dark Merlin, almost, this kind of advisor to a kingdom, right? Kind of the same role that Martin serves in The Gunslinger, and in The Wizard in Glass, etc. And it gives us a little bit of background on this character, shows him in a different setting. We're going to see him again in The Stand, right before we talk about Wizard in Glass. But yeah, I was very excited to kind of like learn more about Flag, because this is like this this is kind of his moment to shine a little bit, because even in The Stand, I recently re-listened to The Stand. I love that book a lot. It was my first like proper Stephen King novel. Flagg is kind of a no-show in that a little bit. He's very memorable when he's there, but there's more page real estate dedicated to like establishing the Constitution of Boulder.
Yeah, and I think that the fact that this is, sort of, I guess what we would now call a young adult novel, it lets King spend a little bit more time developing the villain, because it's okay that he's sort of a comic children's story villain.
Yeah.
Because that's what this is. I always thought it was interesting that this was written, it was written for a 13-year-old, his daughter, which is not necessarily like what you think of as a children's book age.
It's not like fairy tale age like this kind of seems to be.
And it's, I mean, I guess America, right? But it's pretty circumspect about sex, but not at all about violence, really. It's not gory, but it's certainly horrific.
I feel like it's Game of Thrones if you remove about 95% of the sexual assault. I keep like 5% in because, I mean, obviously Thomas was conceived while Roland was tripping on that green drink, the wizard lean.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I mean, like they keep like the kind of coarseness of the peasantry, the jailers and everything. Like, I mean, there's a lot of elements, I think, of Game of Thrones in this. Like, I mean, for any of us that, later went on to read Game of Thrones that had read this first, I mean, you were really primed for it. I mean, it's got dragons, it's got, dark cabals.
Mm-hmm. Even King Roland is like the king of the first book, whose name I cannot remember, just kind of indifferent to rulership and really just kind of likes drinking and hunting and cavorting and stuff like that. Maybe it's just because I was exposed to Game of Thrones very recently, but yeah, I drew that connection a little bit as well.
It was actually enough of a parallel between like King Robert and everything that I went ahead and looked up the dates that they were released just to make sure. I'm sure at some point George R.R. Martin, if he ever does stumble on and read Eyes of the Dragon, he's going to be like, "Hey, wait a minute! First off, Stephen King. Oh wait, whoa, shoot, that was in the '80s. Okay, I did mine in like the mid '90s. Okay, we're cool." Yeah,
a decade before. Yeah. So just kind of about this, it was written kind of as a simple fantasy novel, right? Young adult actually pins it pretty well. And it's about a king named Roland. Again, this is after the gunslinger, and his two sons, Peter and Thomas, and as we mentioned, the kingdom is evil magician, named Randall Flagg. There's another connection here. This kingdom of Delane is actually near Gilead. It's part of the Inner Baronies, which is something that you have to read the Little Sisters of Illyria to find out.
And it seems to have a similar level of technology to what is described in Gilead, too, except the gunpowder is rarer here.
Yes. Yeah, like they don't have a class of people or a class of knights that like take advantage of it. Like, what is it? It's like a capital offense when somebody wastes a shot in this, like...
Oh, yeah, there's somebody celebrating and fires off a blank round, and then the next day gets shipped off to Siberia.
Oh, yeah. Shipped up to the north. Oh, right, like shipped up to be part of the resistance. Yeah, like that weird little kingdom in exile that pops up.
They also mention in here the paper's pretty rare, that only wealthy people have paper. And, I mean, we're talking about the kind of, I guess... amount of wealth or kingdom that can make really elaborate doll houses, master craftsmen, but paper's really rare, just like it is in the Dark Tower series as well. I think Roland mentions that, like, oh my gosh, look at all this paper, this is insane.
Yeah, and the drawing of the three when he goes to New York, and it's like, oh my gosh, how wasteful are these idiots. Yeah. So the story is told as this fairy tale, kind of like not with an omniscient narrator, but like a style of narration that would become very characteristic of King's work. Let's say from like the 80s on. I think I don't really see this early on, but where he starts kind of like it's a character who's describing this stuff to you. like calling to the reader saying, hey, look at this, making kind of suppositions about the characters and the events and stuff like that. Am I crazy seeing that pattern that he just kind of got like a little bit more comfortable with it?
It's just like Arrested Development or something where Ron Howard starts to become, his own character and have his own little asides and everything. It's very much too. And I think he does a good job of hitting that right note of, when you do go back and read the Grimm's fairy tales and things. I mean, has anybody ever been less upset about a mom dying than when you read it in Grimm's fairy tales? You're like, yeah, another dead mom. What's happening with the Hansel and Gretel? He does that right thing, like it's that kind of emotionless, terrible things are happening type of fairy tale narration.
Yeah. And the times when he does sort of speak directly to the reader like that are also the times that I was the most reminded, oh, right, this is a kid's book. Because it's not so much describing these events as like, well, here are the lessons that you can learn from these events about people and the way that you should treat each other.
Yeah. Something about like, oh, I'm a person who's tried to act logically when I could, and here's the thing about friends, and thoughts are like wells or something like that. Yeah, it very much is like drawing out these little miniature parables or kind of metaphors from the stuff
and
that's
sort of
happening.
Showing you that Thomas is a sympathetic character, but then also saying, and by the way, don't you feel that Thomas is a sympathetic character? I would be surprised if you didn't.
Yeah, like saying, like you might be tempted to judge Thomas very harshly for what he is about to do or what he has done. Like there's a tremendous amount of foreshadowing in this book, actually, and I think that like it's kind of told in this kind of semi-overlapping way that halfway kind of intrigued me. I was like, oh, this is really good because it is such a simple story. He can kind of jump around and just kind of highlight the things that are important, but the amount of ground that it covers and covers again is a little frustrating.
Sometimes the jumping around in timeline, I was actually kind of curious when we were going to talk about this, because to make any kind of narrative that follows a timeline is not to follow the progression of the book.
Right. Yeah, like we know who's going to die, like in the first handful of pages of this. Everybody's fate is written down, not just like explicitly, but also in the way that the narrator kind of refers to them, the tone that they kind of come up. Yeah. So that's kind of the generalities of the book. The majority of kind of the first part is kind of introducing the players. I think that the characters in this are, pretty strong, kind of because of how archetypal they are. I can never really pronounce that correctly, but like it's a little bit like a stage call. Almost, we're introducing these people as they kind of like affect each other almost. So everything kind of starts with King Roland, who, as we've kind of said, is this mediocre kind of king. He's, real dumpy. He only feels at home when he's out there shooting bows and arrows at stags and dragons and stuff like that. And he pretty much just doesn't care about being king that much, aside from the wine that it gives him access to.
In just a few paragraphs, too, they do such a great job of characterizing his mom. Like, it's got to be one of those things. You're like, yeah, Queen Elizabeth is going to live forever. Like, Prince Charles is never going to have to worry about being king. He can just go play polo, do whatever he wants. And then, inevitably, after a juggler, a fool makes a bad decision, Roland's mom is dead. And then all of a sudden, he's in a panic, which we see replayed later with his son.
Yeah, but it's that idea that monarchy is a crapshoot, right? And they came up, maybe not quite snake eyes with this one, but again, a great queen is followed by kind of a mediocre king. But in kind of searching for somebody to bear him an heir, they find somebody who is fantastic, another kind of great queen from kind of a barely noble family. The flag picks the shyest girl to bring forward. To kind of like thrust into this marriage with a husband who is ambivalent towards sex, Queen Sasha.
Who, with as few, I guess, pages as she gets in the book, her influence obviously defines the whole narrative. I mean, with not a lot of, I guess, screen time, you might call it in a book, she really is pretty impactful. I mean, I don't think there's anybody that it doesn't just think Queen Sasha's a delight. And certainly like her people as well.
Yeah. And for all of Flag having selected her for being sort of timid and in his mind probably easy to control, she sort of turns out to be his undoing.
Oh, for sure. Because she starts to raise up the oldest son, Peter, kind of in her image. You know, she takes a very hands-on approach with him, and kind of both of them end up being like goody two-shoes in a way that is actually good. You would want that in people. As characters, they end up being just like a little bit flat until Peter's imprisoned. But it's like, oh, you know, like you would want this to happen. You would want them to be upright and to care about actual people like they do.
You know, we're among friends here, so we can probably be real with each other. We all secretly hate Peter, right? I mean, Peter sucks. Like, nobody wants the most popular, handsome guy in school to also be nice. Like, King kind of makes us all into little Thomases that are kind of resented. Like, of course, perfect Peter did that. Like, you know, like Thomas is goofus and Peter is gallant. Like, Peter's always doing everything right. And I think that he does kind of steer the reader to feel that same kind of resentment. I mean, am I wrong? Do we all hate Peter?
And in doing so, I mean, makes us also feel like the citizenry of Delane, who are quick to jump on the bandwagon when it seems that it has turned, and that he did have something dark going on after all.
Yeah, like Peter very well could be the antagonist of a different story, or would be an antagonist if told from a different perspective.
I think it helps. It helps to show Flag in contrast by having Sasha and Peter be so just lily white like that. So just from a narrative standpoint, I think it's does serve some purpose other than just like, oh, look at how great this guy is.
Yeah. Yeah. And we get a couple of like small little vignettes with this. The two that kind of stick out most are Peter really kind of latching on to his mom's dollhouse. Actually, so there's this whole kind of chapter, you know, Sasha has been pulled from her kind of modest upbringing, and, you know, something that she really cherished from when she was young was, hey, I had this dollhouse. And Roland, in this kind of misguided gesture of like, I can give you the moon and stars, and, you know, I will buy you a garden or whatever. He commissions the greatest craftsman in all of Delane to manufacture this wonder of a dollhouse for her. In doing so, drives that craftsman to blindness, basically like uses him up, making this incredible thing. And she's like, oh, okay, yeah, that's nice. I kind of like my old one though. Like,
there was a line in there that I loved, and to paraphrase it, where she was talking about like when she was playing with the dollhouse, that it wasn't any fun like playing dollhouse and pretending that the queen was going to come to visit when you're actually the queen. I mean, you've kind of reached the pinnacle of the pretend game, you know?
Yeah, you can't like get to the end and then turn around and have it look the same.
But he does have that elegant kind of description there too, where you talk about like, because I mean that is the way that it is with your toys and everything, that you think like, gosh, what's going to happen when I'm an adult one day? But you kind of slowly lose interest, and you get your subscription to, well, I don't know what boys do, but 17 magazine, and then you're not really playing with your dollhouse anymore. I mean, you do just slowly put it down. There's no big light switch, and I thought that was really elegantly characterized.
Yeah. But then it like this thing becomes a hand-me-down, right? Like people look kind of, you know, sideways at Peter playing with this dollhouse. But, you know, he's in there reinforcing standard gender norms by, you know, playing war with them. And
laying siege to it with action figures rather than.
Yeah, pretty much. And the other thing is Peter rescues a horse that would have been, I think, destroyed is the proper word. So one of the horses in the castle broke its leg, and, you know, Peter comes in and says, like, basically says, why are you killing this thing? Like, we can probably heal it. And so Peter sets about taking care of this horse every single day, even though everybody thought that he wouldn't. And he just kind of like, by, you know, in order to do this, he exerts, you know, a king-like will almost. He says, no, this is going to happen, and, you know, nobody can stop me.
And also proves that he is true to his word when he promises to do all of the work to keep the horse alive if it's spared, and that he's a very responsible pet owner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you never see that horse. If you had asked me, I would have said, oh yeah. And later throughout the book, they always talk about how he's always riding that horse around and having a great time. But I guess that story was just
horse is at the top of the needle with him in prison.
Yeah. Oh God, that horse would be so scared.
And they would never get it down either, right? Because it'll go up the stairs. But
yeah, we're
I'm gonna need a lot. I'm gonna need a lot more rope.
Napkins for rope for the horse too. We're gonna need a little bit more thread.
Now, if I ask for a pulley, will they get wise to it?
And 400 years worth of meals later, he was finally able to lower the horse skeleton down.
What if he did like a Shawshank Redemption and then just kind of like took him out into the yard and then just sent a little bit of horse bone out his pant leg every once in a while?
Like Flag gets up there and there's just a poster of Rita Hayworth.
I think you mean Madam Hayworth of Ritaville. Not Ritaville. Not Margarita.
Lady Hayworth.
Lady Hayworth. I said Ritaville. I did not mean for that to be Margarita.
Yeah, that's what people who are from there call it.
Yeah. But yeah, this horse is kind of never heard from again. I even think it's like one of the more humble donkeys who pulls in the Deus Cart Machina. Or Deus Ex Cart at the end. But yeah, this again is just him saving somebody's life and kind of working with his friend, because he's going to have a commoner friend named Ben, who helps him out, and Ben kind of only figures it in the last third of the book. And then we have Flag, who kind of very obviously is pulling the strings by drugging the king.
Yeah, on that wizard lean.
Yeah, and sort of ends up being he's doing so trying to get the king to bear an heir, just so that people will calm down a little bit, and then ends up sort of that. It ends up not being important in Peter's birth, because the king doesn't need any Viagra potion to make that happen after the day that he kills the big dragon. But he does produce the bad son that way.
In that aspect, like Stephen King really is like a Native American, because throughout the story he uses every aspect of the dragon, like killing it, like conceives Peter, the actual eyes of the dragon later in the book, the arrow that had shot the dragon. I mean, he really got full value out of that dragon once he introduced it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so Peter is kind of pure because he is conceived both of pure love and also dragon hate. Yeah. And so Flag kind of looks at Peter and says, "Oh boy, we got to try again." Because Peter's been ruined. He's been raised too moral. Is the thing. Let's go into Flag a little bit, because his motivations are kind of laid out kind of straight up. It's funny how much this squares away with what Martin and Farson, to a certain extent, kind of the MO of this type of character throughout all of King's work, of kind of this agent of chaos who pretty much just exists to corrupt rulership and turn kingdoms against themselves until they explode and are gone.
Yeah, like he just makes like these little nudges here and there until the world kind of moves on. Like he's definitely a breaker. And
it doesn't seem here. It is fairly careful not to like ever explain his motives, other than he just kind of likes to see. He's mischievous. He just likes to see the chaos. It doesn't. He doesn't really stand to gain anything out of it ever.
No.
Which is pretty central to it. And something that struck me about this one was he is occasionally, and I don't remember how true this is in The Stand, but there are occasional little moments of just sort of childishness in this character that kind of remind you of where it's not so much the banality of evil as just the sort of like immaturity of it.
Yeah, like it's blind, like it's myopic.
Yeah, specifically, like in The Stand, Flag is like prone to these fits of rage, not like menace or anything, but he will, just straight up like after. That's a spoiler for The Stand. When things don't go his way, especially toward the end, he definitely gets more predictable or more unpredictable and swings more wildly. In kind of ways that he doesn't toward the beginning when he is mostly powerful. And like what's funny is Flag, in whatever story he pops in, is actually kind of the sole author of his undoing in a lot of ways.
I think too, because that was one thing that surprised me, having read The Stand and then not having read this for so long, seeing that there is like again a cyclical nature to it, kind of like how the evil sleeps in It. You know, like every 40 years, it's time to wake up and mess up a kingdom again, or I guess every 400 years.
Yeah.
But the fact that like they run through and talk about his past lives, oh, when I did this, how the blood ran in the streets. You know, it's interesting that he's really playing the long game. Maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't.
Yeah. So Flag's plan, is kind of in ruins with Peter. So he puts together some a boner potion for for Roland, and gets him nice and drunk, and this makes him conceive Thomas. And in order to make sure that Sasha is out of the picture, he bribes a midwife to cut Sasha so that she bleeds to death, making it look like she died naturally in childbirth. So the way is clear. Again, Roland is this indifferent ruler. He already has this amazing son in Peter, so he feels like this is already kind of here, leaving Thomas to the background where he will just kind of be under Flag's, kind of supervision almost, pretty much solely, right? And Thomas takes more after Roland than Peter does, and boy, does Thomas hate him for it.
The scene of dying in childbirth struck me as a like, thanks, Dad, for this cool story that you wrote me as a 13-year-old girl.
A little bit.
I was actually pretty uncomfortable with that as well. I was like, maybe like as a 12-year-old, I was thinking, I better like just take a peek and make sure one day my doctor doesn't have a little knife or anything. Like maybe I should just keep an eye, like do some like a metal detector on the way in, something,
Yeah. I mean, one thing about doctors, they do often have little knives.
Yeah. It's the perfect crime.
Varying sizes. They have people who even hand them the knives when they ask for them. Yeah. And I'm sure they, if they're trying to do it on the download, they have like Navy SEAL style gestures that they can use to call for scalpels.
Oh, like a full, like, queen murdering ghost protocol.
Yep. And then we're on to the next kingdom. Yeah. Nobody wants to let a kingdom stand. Just chill out for like a second, guys.
We just can't have anything nice.
Nope. So Thomas is brought up very much in Peter's shadow, and Flag kind of gets in good and kind of like fucks with him. Like he'll just be like, hey, you little dipshit, do you want to follow me into this dark tunnel full of bats?
Did anybody else think that we were just a hair's breadth away from Thomas actually becoming a cool Batman figure? I mean, his mom's dead, his dad's dead. He had a weird thing, like, with the bats. Like, I guess Flag could be, like, a Joker character. I mean, he could have ended up being a real badass.
Yeah, he kind of does, too. We never get to hear about Thomas's second act.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a butler with him.
Yep. Oh, my gosh.
It's full Batman.
That is so apt, actually. So one of these Batman, becoming the Knight kind of things is Flag will shows Thomas a way back to kind of get behind the mounted head of the dragon that Roland killed the day that Peter was conceived. Kind of look through these glass replacement eyes to spy on his dad during his nightly drunken ravings.
I really enjoyed seeing Roland's, he was a stinking old man that pissed in the fire and everything like that. There is something alluring about seeing him at his worst. I mean, you do feel, I feel like Stephen King writes Roland with this kind of tenderness. Mm-hmm. Like, even though Roland's this, like, hot, gross old man, like, this hot mess, like, you're like, oh, he's doing the best he can. He's just not a smart guy.
Yeah.
Thinking gives him boulders in his head.
It was interesting how, like, lovingly detailed the prose about the secret passage was. It seemed like weirdly over-described in a way that was, I mean, I like a secret passage a lot, so I didn't mind. Who knows? Maybe this is why I like secret passages so much. But yeah, there's just a lot of detail in how you get into it and what measures were set up to let you get out without, accidentally revealing it to somebody who happens to be walking down the hall and stuff like that. It's a weirdly technical description of the thing.
Yeah, of the periscope that will let people, let you spot an oncoming scullery maid or something like that. Yeah,
and also, was that secret passage built after he killed the dragon? Because it seems like it's both described as like an ancient, weird, undiscovered feature of the castle, but also it's hooked up to a thing that's only been there for like 5 years.
This castle is basically described like Hogwarts. You know, like either it changes around or it is just so convoluted in its construction that it might as well be just completely chaotic.
If we didn't actually say this already, the way that the secret passage works is that it's got little panels that open up behind the eyes of the taxidermied head of the dragon that Roland killed earlier in the story on the day that Peter was conceived. Which is just sort of there as his like glory days moment. It seems like it's like, oh well, here's this one amazing heroic thing that I got to do as a king, and that's pretty cool. Yeah. But then it just serves as a kind of a focal point for him to be sad about being an old man later.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so I was very happy that this is the way the Eyes of the Dragon articulated, because Eyes of the Dragon, it's a very kind of generic fantasy book title. Right, and if this was like, oh, we crushed up a dragon eyes to be the thing that killed Flag or something like that, like to find out that it is kind of like that the eyes were just kind of this porthole that Thomas could look through to kind of see his future, you know, and to like kind of get closer to his dad in a real perverse way, to like watch him kind of at his lowest in what I can only assume is Stephen King kind of telling a little bit about his nightly ritual when he was really drinking, you know, pissing into the fire and screaming at mounted heads on walls. You know, I think that is a cool and unexpected way to handle that.
The fact that Thomas like just found his dad disgusting and had like, you know, was so, I guess maybe such disdain for him, but that he couldn't stop going really resonated with me. Because I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I'm like a total dirtbag. Like when I was little, I used to sneak down like on Christmas morning and finish off Santa's cookies like it was the perfect crime. Like, because they'd be like, I figured my parents would just think Santa ate them.
Oh God!
Like I'm not a nice person, and again, you guys are probably wonderful people, but I really had a lot of empathy with Sneaky Thomas there.
Yeah,
and interestingly, it sort of the ability to see his father was almost entirely just a vehicle for Thomas's self-loathing. Because he, you know, basically grows into his father over the course of the story, and I think he has some sense of that, and his father is not as cool as Peter, and he's not as cool as Peter. So he'll be pissing and farting in that lounge someday.
You know, you mentioned Hogwarts. Peter's a real Cedric Diggory.
Yeah. I'm led to believe that's a character in Harry Potter. Cedric is what? He's the older brother of Ron, I think.
No, he's just another little like perfect like doobie like gallant
football hero, Eagle Scout.
He does everything right.
Oh, yeah,
everybody hates that guy.
Yeah. Another thing about this that kind of stuck out to me was like that moment when you realize your parents are human. You know, and like either gross or disgusting, like, you know, building this into that, building this into the story, you know, about a king and an unfavored prince. You know, I think that like both of these people are incredibly human in the sense that humanity is flawed and petty.
There was one thing that I had noted in here. There's one line about, you know, later when I believe it's when Peter's talking about maybe we could get some of our own pocket money together and buy some wine. Or maybe it's after the scene where his dad rejects his boat. But there's a line in there about his, and although the taste had been bitter, he had liked it because it was his heart. That's actually a line from a poem that Stephen King puts at the beginning of The Langoliers in 4 Past Midnight.
Yeah, it's in the desert by Stephen Crane.
Yeah, exactly.
I need to make a note of this because I do not know that poem.
Yeah, it's a real brief little poem. In the desert, I saw a creature, naked, bestial, who squatting on the ground held his heart in his hands and ate of it. I said, "Is it good, friend? It is bitter, bitter," he answered, "but I like it because it is bitter and because it is my heart."
He's got a lot of good stuff. You read the sort of greatest hits of Stephen Crane, you'll like him.
Okay. Yeah. The Black Riders and other lines. Good.
Maybe he just does this, and I don't always know or recognize what it's from, but it did seem weird that it's just like, oh, I'm just gonna plagiarize a couple sentences of this this paragraph of this book.
Yeah. Or like the entire structure of Child Roll into the Dark Tower came for Gunslinger.
Sure.
Yeah.
Stephen King seems to be a real master of those phrases that get stuck in your head, those really evocative phrases. And I wonder if he doesn't, kind of like all of us do, get those phrases stuck in his head, certain lines of poems and things, because some of those, like Baby Can You Dig Your Man and things like that. Like you just find yourself
Bumpty,
walking around
bumpty, bump.
thinking about them.
Yeah. He has an ear is the thing for it. Is the thing about it. And that I think is why I personally kind of like gravitate toward it. Toward his stuff. But yeah, it is kind of strange that he just slips that homage in there. Again, just kind of out of time, So with all of the major characters kind of laid out on the stage here, let's get to some grisly murder. So before this happens, we kind of get this little scene where Peter says, "Hey, why don't we buy, put our coin together, like Autumn said, I believe, and bring our dad a glass of wine every single night." And Thomas says, "Why would we buy wine that we already own? We're royalty, damn it!" Not recognizing that it's about the gesture, right?
And I like that Thomas went like full out being angry like that when the real reason he didn't want to do it was because he had gotten caught by the wine master stealing wine and had to give him money so that he wouldn't tell. So that was a nice layering of motives. First off, like he gets to bag on his brother and say, "That's stupid. You're the worst." And like, "Oh man, I don't want to go up to the wine guy and have him be like, 'Oh, what are you doing back down here, you little thief?'"
Yep. Yeah. Boy, Thomas really likes his drink for a I think 12-year-old,
14-year-old boy.
Yeah. I think a 12-year-old at the time maybe that this happens, but it's a different. Just over in Delane, kids, they drink wine at dinner with their parents. It's no big deal.
I'm sure if I were 12 and I had unlimited access to wine, I probably would love wine too.
Oh yeah,
woo,
wine's great. Like it makes you feel good.
I love junior high. I never want to leave.
Yeah, but this is kind of used by Flag as the way to deliver a deadly poison to Roland. Peter doesn't end up delivering it. Flag will kind of come in behind him and deliver it himself, probably because he cannot stand to have that joy taken from him. But let's talk about dragon sand.
Yeah, there's a scene much earlier where Flag considers poisoning Sasha, and it is described in great detail, him like sort of crushing this incredibly venomous spider with a special glove that he has to wear so that the venom doesn't get through. And it's like, wow, that must be the worst possible poison in all of the world. But like, nope, this is just setting your expectations high so that they can describe this stuff.
Yep. Like him lovingly raising a spider for 20 years just to do this and then back away from it. No, this dragon sand, he keeps it in a tiny little enchanted envelope, and he goes to great pains. King goes to great pains to describe the process that he has to go through to like keep this from contaminating anything around us. So this is sand.
Also,
okay, go ahead.
The box has a lock on it that is a like intelligent carrot,
yep.
Which is a thing that I had forgotten about until I reread this.
I forgot about that too.
It's like a not scary Necronomicon.
The lock is a carrot that will scream if someone who isn't him tries to open it.
Yeah. Like he has turned a mandragora into a lock. It's pretty great. Like that is a wonderful idea. Also, it's funny that you mentioned the Necronomicon, because that is one of the books that Flag reads from. Like it straight up is, this book bound in human skin, written by Alhazred, and that tells of the Plateau of Lang. So we got King doing his fanboy stuff there. But yes, he has this box like.
He does that. He does bring in that Lovecraft, like just very specifically which I mean, Lovecraft was all about that, right? Like he sort of wanted his mythos to be kind of public domain referentially.
Yeah, he open sourced it in like the good way of open source.
King just does it like a word at a time here and there. Mm-hmm. Like every once in a while, somebody will just like say one thing about Yog Sothoth and then never again.
Yep. Yeah. So this sand, it is sand from a kingdom east of Garland, where it is said that Flag came from. He didn't come from there. He came from Delane. We'll get to that later, though. Much later. And a single grain of this will basically light anything on fire. And it will kind of burn and smolder until it finds a kind of a living host to gobble it up and kind of act as the vessel and then burn itself out. And so we get this lovingly detailed kind of decontamination process as he throws all of the stuff into the sewer, and it pops up later too. Like 5 years later, it is still down there smoldering, like the little bits of it that the rats didn't get into.
Yeah, it's definitely the ultimate rat killer. I really thought it was interesting because it's just another way that the dragons tie in as well. I mean, with it being called dragon sand and everything, it really goes to show the. I mean, I feel like Stephen King uses that a lot, where fire is the only thing that can destroy evil, type of thing, and the fact that the arrow that went through the dragon when Roland killed it retains its heat, like it's still hot. The dragon sand itself. I mean, I have to imagine that's probably the part of town that actual dragons live in, if that's dragon sand, you know?
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just a catchy name. I don't know.
It's a good name for a poison. I'm way into dragon sand, and I would be.
It's like everlasting gobstopper poison is not like that threatening, you know?
Yeah. I'm kind of surprised. Like, this is the first time that I can remember anyway that I've encountered this idea of a poison that burns somebody from the inside out like this.
And for a while after you take it, you feel really, really good. Like you get a few days of like your hair stops being gray and your skin gets its color back. But then
nope, and then your hair stops being gray because it starts being orange because it's on fire.
It occurred to me after reading The Wastelands and The Talisman also that it seems like later in his career, King would have probably decided that this sand was from some like irradiated post-nuclear kingdom next door.
Oh yeah.
And that, like, I remembered kind of thinking that it was described that way, but then when I reread it, I was like, no, I must have just made that up after reading about so many similar areas that just the air here will kill you.
If Gilead is just dragon sand now, they really did mess that world up.
Yeah, there's no way it's not coming back. See, it's so weird because like Garland is established as this actual place, and this is a kingdom to the east of that. But when they follow the beam, they go south and east. So I don't know how they pass it. The real answer is it doesn't matter because it's fast.
It doesn't. But I mean, he also says like the tower falling means that time and direction are both and that nothing is the same as it was before.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it's basically the tower is just it's a machine that stops everything from constantly being retconned, and they just turned it off, and so now you sort of say whatever you want, and everything is true at the same time.
Yep, and the sooner we accept that that's okay, the sooner everything is going to be just fine.
Everything is going to always have been just fine.
Yeah. Yep, the intermediate pluperfect. So. I don't know that that's an actual tense. I just love the word pluperfect. Flag delivers this poison to Roland in his glass of wine, and Thomas is there, and he in a scene that he's going to relive in Nightmares and Nightmares to Come, doesn't actually stop this. He knows something is wrong with this whole scenario. In all of his time, he has never seen Flag bring something. And
he watches the whole scene unfold through the peephole in the dragon's eyes.
Yes. Yeah. So, seeing but unseen, he kind of, just gets a view of the act going down. And then, man, that is such a cruel aspect of this poison that it makes you feel so great until you ultimately die in what has to be the most horrible way imaginable. Like, they talk about the doctors and the servants not being able to get close to him. To get close to Roland because of the kind of the burning heat inside. I don't know. Very, very powerful. I'll stop gushing about dragon sand.
I think we probably, Zach and I would both prefer to go in our sleep surrounded by our loved ones. I mean, I think that's a definite.
Yeah.
Oh, so, I don't know. I mean, it sort of gives you a literal blaze of glory. Like if you could, if you could just put me in a catapult and aim me at a city we don't like. Right.
Yeah. Watch me, I'll become ammo. Yeah. So yeah, it's real bad. And so this is revealed, nobody really knows where this what this is. It is from a kingdom that is gone and forgotten, and it hasn't been seen before, and it's never really revealed to be poison until Dennis, Peter's butler, finds a burning rat that Flag has placed behind his kind of trick bookcase. A rat that died under similar circumstances. And everything kind of hinges on this as well. It's everything falling into place in a way that it really ought not to, in order to make this happen. When Dennis finds this and then takes it to the judge, Anders Pena.
I have to say, I feel so sorry for Dennis in this, because Dennis does everything right. Mm-hmm. Everything that Dennis does is right. It's just, it goes so wrong. Like, you do the right thing, and then you ruin the entire kingdom. Yep. And now everybody has an 80% tax rate, and all you did was just say, hey, there's a mouse that's on fire. This is kind of weird. It's in Peter's room. I mean, like, he did, again, everything right. Like, he's just hanging out in the Middle Ages with his, like, feudal lord and some crappy fiefdom, and...
Yeah. He's following in his dad's footsteps. He's doing everything right. Like, he doesn't make a wrong decision.
When you ask who you are in the book, like, isn't that the Game of Thrones things? Like, whoever you think should sit the Iron Throne says a lot about you as a person. Mm-hmm. Like, me as a person, I would be the Dennis in this book. Like, I'm just trying to do something right, and I ruin everything.
Yeah.
I'm not that bright. Listen, I'm just trying to do what I'm supposed to.
I don't know. Dennis wouldn't steal Santa's cookies, I don't think.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
Anders Pena is a character that I think is more interesting to me rereading this as an adult. He's just the sort of cold and calculating but very fair sort of super lawyer of the kingdom.
Yeah. Like, in the absence of, like, a passionate ruler, with Roland kind of cavorting around, like, Pena is the person who inspires fear. But, like, it's a very just kind of fear, right? Like,
yeah, and he is a check against Flag's power.
Yeah. He's very sympathetic, and even, like, the agony that he goes through over the course of even, litigating this this case against Peter, when the evidence comes out, and then kind of, like, living with it and seeing, that things might not actually add up the way that he thought he did. Like, there's a complete arc for Pena as he, like, second guesses, because he was just kind of doing what he thought was the right thing too.
Agree completely. Yep. I also enjoy Pena a lot more, particularly the scenes that we see later in the book where, because of how kind of crappy the kingdom has gotten, he's living almost in, I guess, genteel poverty. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He still has like that weird slave. But it was like, I could barely afford this crappy house, but somehow I still have this manservant.
Yeah, we have like 3 sips of wine left, but I've got a like body servant.
Yeah,
he must have prepaid for a lifetime subscription on that guy.
It's not the servant of the month club. Like, it's a long-term commitment.
Yeah, he came with the house. He's just there for the resale value. Yeah, like, even if you're not going to use them, you want to keep them there in case you want to flip the house and or the person. Yeah, so Pena is there, and the thing that puts a nail in Peter's coffin is when Pena confronts him, Peter is so overwhelmed with the fact that his dad is dead that he doesn't deny the crime. Like somebody who didn't do it would. He weeps for his father, and that weeping is, it has this appearance of somebody who is regretful, right?
Yeah, and it seems that even before that, like, his fate had already been decided in the sort of public court.
Yes. Yeah, because
that once the rumor mill spun out of hand, his perfect reputation was too easy for people to besmirch. So
yeah, like, he stood the most to gain from Roland dying, and so it makes the most sense to put it on Peter because he would become king, right? It doesn't matter that he has a goody two shoes. In fact, that might have hurt him.
And the only way to fix this is going to turn out to be like a very dramatic story that is also the kind of stuff they're going to talk about at the bar, and one that, sort of requires a more revilable antagonist.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like, it, after this kind of whirlwind trial, Peter is locked up in the Needle, which is this gigantic tower at the center of the kingdom, where they put royals to basically live out their sentences because they cannot execute them. You cannot kill somebody of royal blood in this kingdom. And Thomas is kind of put in at 12 years old as this incredibly pitiable figure. Like, his description of Thomas's essentially stage fright and just vomiting from terror, I had so much, like, I was like, oh god, I felt that before. It was very, very lovingly rendered, I thought.
This is one of those cases where Stephen King does a really good job of showing that Thomas is sort of pitiable and sympathetic, as opposed to just telling you that he is, in spite of all of the mean stuff that he does.
Yeah, instead of just saying like, "Hey, don't judge him right now because he might be good in the end." Yeah. Autumn?
It just does a nice job of setting up his total dependence on Flag. Like, you see that he's completely age-wise, emotionally, in every aspect of his life, completely unprepared for this whatsoever.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not a single thing in his life that has prepared him for this.
No, like, he hadn't even rehearsed this. He was not next in line. You know, like, he didn't even, like, he wouldn't even be able to order his burrito at Chipotle. Like, he hadn't looked at the menu just yet because he thought that he would be able to live on as some kind of duke, you know.
I gotta tell you, after the bat thing, though, I don't know that I would trust Flag to order my burrito at Chipotle.
No, it'd be like the weird, gross tofu stuff that's like kind of dry and not spiced that right. Yeah, that ruined my lunch one time. But yeah, like, just Thomas is not prepared for this at all, and like this in the short term, again, because Flag kind of, for as much as he plays the long game, you know, really is only effective in the short term, is a masterful move, because he has a figurehead to operate behind and really start manipulating the levers, not just, you know, through potions, but by actually like just kind of whispering in his ear.
Oh, when Flag pretends to leave, when he's like, "Well, bye, Thomas. See you later. Have a great time vomiting in your stateroom. I'm out." I mean, it is just a perfect setup when he's basically begging him to, and planting the evil seed for Anders Payne, you know? Mm-hmm. Well, Payne doesn't want me around. I'd love to stay and help you, but I can't. Boo-boo.
Yeah. Well, no, we can deal with him. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, do you want me to behead him right now? I'll cut his head off. Just stay.
Yeah. No, it's a real bad situation. But then, like, Thomas kind of fades into the background a little bit. We see what happens to the kingdom, and it's mostly, hey, the taxes are way too high. You know, we're making bad decisions, and then just like all of this is kind of driving the nobility out. Like the people who have the ability to leave, they're kind of going north into the forest and putting together this resistance almost, right? Whereas everybody else is kind of sticking around, the people who don't have the ability to leave, and just kind of suffering under this as, you know, they get closer and closer to the breaking point. Meanwhile, Peter is kind of kept up in this needle, and we get this, you know, kind of very dramatic telling of him, you know, fasting for a week and then, you know, starved out of his mind, beating the shit out of his jailer.
I have to say, I really enjoyed his jailer, and his name is escaping me at the moment. Benton?
Maybe.
But anyway, he just does such a good job. Like, my dude is not very couth. Like, he reminds me a lot of Court from The Gunslinger.
Yeah.
You know, where he's like, you know, basically talking like an old-timey pirate and punching people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that jailer is great.
Yeah. And like Peter says, okay, well, I've beaten you to within an inch of your life. I've disgraced you in front of your colleagues. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to the judge, ask for basically a pittance, and in exchange, I want a dollhouse and some napkins.
And I loved his letter, man. Like, what kind of swagger is that? Payne, I have decided to live. I mean,
Yep.
I mean, that is chewing some scenery right there. Like, that's like some Elizabeth Taylor, like...
It does sort of start to make him likable, yeah.
That's a diva moment.
I guess he got some advice. The first thing you do when you get to prison, beat up the strongest guy you can see, even if it's the guard, and then demand a dollhouse.
Well, you know, you got to lean on unpredictability, right?
You know, if it wasn't that, it was going to be a rock hammer and a poster, right?
Exactly. And then he was going to escape to Margaritaville. I forget where we landed on that. So, yeah. So he's following those classic rules, that classic advice. And as the kingdom kind of burns down around him, 5 years pass as we very slowly learn about this this kind of plan that has been kind of set into motion, and it's kind of hard because this is presented a little bit non-linearly. Like we have cuts to Flag going north to kind of try and quell this resistance. We have cuts to kind of the servants, like, you know, Ben has kind of disappeared. Dennis is really unhappy with kind of taking care of Thomas. Thomas is incredibly unhappy. Like, he's balding, he's getting fat, like the wine is turning him into his dad.
Poor Dennis, like, oh man, Thomas fell asleep on my servant couch again. Time to go lay on the floor like a dog.
Yeah, because if he leaves, Thomas is going to know, and he just wants somebody to be there and talk to him until he falls asleep in a drunken stupor. It's real bad. But Peter's plan is actually pretty ingenious, right? He is, so these napkins, he is taking a couple of threads from them at a time, so small that nobody would have, you know, so that nobody would notice if they were being laundered. Let's put a pin in that. And he is running them through the loom that is inside this masterfully crafted dollhouse that was made. Fully functional loom, you know, so fully functional it made a man blind, and turning those into a rope that he will use to descend from the tower and basically reclaim the throne for himself.
Which, when you've got nothing, I mean, it's a great plan.
Yeah, the loom was mentioned earlier as a feature of the dollhouse. That's crazy.
Yes, yeah, like, oh, this is a real testament to like how crazy this thing is.
I don't think I could have put together such a great escape plan.
Yeah, I forgot about this because when he was kind of picking around at the walls like you would do, you're like, oh, God, I cannot imagine the boredom. Picking around at the walls, he found this false brick, and he pulled it out, and he found a locket inside with a note that basically outlined kind of the same circumstances that happened back in Delane, you know, about 400 years ago or so, from another noble who was exiled up to the Needle, saying, hey, people think that I committed some kind of regicide, but I didn't. It was actually Flag. And so there's been like a little bit of scuttlebutt about this in the kingdom. Like, hey, you know, Flag has been here for 30 years now, but he's only aged a decade. What's happening? Like, we're getting a little bit of insight into Flag as kind of this ageless stranger almost.
Yeah, he's got a real Leonardo DiCaprio thing going.
Yeah, it's a real man in the iron napkin, which wouldn't be very effective at all. No,
I thought you meant Leonardo DiCaprio from What's Eating Gilbert Grape, and I was going to say that I don't see it.
Yep. It's a little strange. So he's doing this, and then just over the course of this, so there's a little bit of irony to this, because we get some a little bit of history behind this. Like, back around the time this murder took place, there was a tremendous amount of kind of unemployment in the kingdom, and so as a make-work program for the royalty, they like brought people in to weave together as many napkins as they could. Doesn't matter if they actually were used. We're just going to store them in one hallway of our chaos castle. And maybe, you know, maybe the spiders or moths will eat them and it'll be fine. But like this is revealed very slowly, and Peter could have pulled way more threads off and cut a couple of years off of his imprisonment by just being a little bit more bold, but he had no way of knowing that these napkins were being thrown away instead of being laundered.
I thought from the narrator that was what would you call it, a dick move, because it didn't change anything at all. But like, oh, by the way, he could have gotten out of there 5 years faster, except he wasn't brave enough to take like 20 threads. Oh well, moving on.
Except it's because of that surplus that he's able to live, because this is a stupid idea.
I tell you, you know who really lands on their feet in this entire novel is the lady that's picking the royal crest off of the napkins.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. Like, she's coming up in this, like, shitty fiefdom. Like, her only skill is that she has a needle and she doesn't run her mouth. And, I mean, she's found this recession-proof job. Like, the whole country's falling apart and she's still got a job. Nobody beheaded her.
Yeah.
Like, she really landed on her feet in this whole deal. I commend her.
Yeah, 5 years of steady, dependable employment.
Absolutely.
It's also weird economy?
Because... Am I right? What's that, Zach?
The entire bribe is 8 guilders a year, And at some point, the guard is described as having spent 2 guilders on one night of drinking.
Right.
So either he was buying a lot of rounds of drinks for a lot of people that night, or alcohol is a real luxury item in this game.
Is there a currency conversion in the back? Like, how much would a Coca-Cola be in Delane money? Like 5 pence?
I have no idea. What's a guilder? Yeah. So we're given this peek behind the curtain at just kind of the past dysfunction of Delane, and we're led to believe, like, hey, maybe both extremes are wrong. No, that's not the case at all. Flag is kind of a dick. So there's a little bit of a side thing that I didn't really engage with too terribly much, where Dennis says, like, hey, I can't really do this anymore. I need to go find out what's up. I need to actually look into what's going on. He goes and meets up with Ben Stodd and kind of these rulers in exile, almost this resistance. And there's kind of this whole thread of, like, nobody really wants this to come to head in a war, and kind of it's really just Ben, Dennis, and this kind of hunter peasant named Naomi who can, work their way back into Delane to kind of try and stop this, and kind of like reinstate Peter on the throne, because Peter's going to be amenable, and kind of like set things right again.
Yeah, and Dennis knows the truth about Flag having killed Roland at this point, and so does Payna as a result of him having told him.
Yes. Yeah, and so they're kind of setting this all back up again, and they pass through the forest and they get into the sewers, and this is where they find the smoldering remains of rats and just water that never stops boiling around this dagger that was used to cut the sand. Oh my god, so good. But somewhere around here, you two have probably read this more recently than I have. How does Flag become aware of the plan to escape?
At some point, Flag starts to have these dreams when he's getting a little out of the box. Like, they start to do that he who shall not be named thing. Everyone starts saying, oh, we don't even speak his name, don't even think his name. But he does, it comes to him in a dream. And then are the first hints of it, and then he uses almost like a wizard's glass type of, like, he uses some magic rock that he can use to foresee, and he uses it so hard that he breaks it.
Oh yeah, there's like dreams. Like Thomas has dreams of Flag being blinded in one eye after a great amount of heat. And Flag kind of gets like increasingly clear visions of kind of the ending
Flag
of the
keeps
book.
waking up with his eye hurting, and he slowly becomes sort of preternaturally aware of whenever people are thinking about him.
Oh,
and then his parrot screams escape, and then he figures it out.
And I worked so hard to try to make that stone that he was scrying into some sort of wizard's rainbow kind of thing. And every time I'd be like, well, it could be. They'd be like, nope, it's bumpy, it's cloudy, it's just a hunk of rock. And I'd be like, well, maybe. And then they'd be like, he held the bumpy rock. And I'm like, okay, never mind.
But there were 6 of them that were unaccounted for, and nope, no.
One could be bumpy, right?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I'm very happy we're doing this show because I want to talk about the bends of the rainbow so much. We're gonna get there, guys, and that might be a spoiler, but I mean, come on. There's something in the future called the bends of the rainbow. That's amazing.
And if you don't know what that means, read the book.
Yeah, it's pretty great. So this draws to a head as Flag picks up this artifact from his old life. From a time when he haunted Delane not as a sorcerer, but instead as an executioner. This kind of axe with a mace at the very end of it. Like, this thing sounds like a total murder machine. And says, like, all right, well, I have enough telling me I need to go and take Peter out of the equation. And we're going to stop this right now. But he's a little bit too late. And this kind of plays out like the end of The Shining almost.
I was going to make that same point. I was going to bring that up because that's what it felt like to me too, because Flag's almost and I can't tell if I'm conflating the movie and the book too much, but I mean, he's chasing him. He's basically making goofs like, "Oh, Peter."
Yeah.
It's very much like The Shining
frenzied.
to me. Yeah.
It's the illustrations in the original book they're of kind of uneven quality, but it is always so difficult for me to take that axe seriously because it is drawn with what essentially just looks like a pair of balls on top of it.
Yeah, it's got the spikes sticking off with like little pubes.
Like little pubes, and there's two of them when it's described as having one, but the artist was like, I think this should be balls.
Yeah,
Excuse me, we call that the King's Iron.
Oh, yeah, the King's Iron. Forgot about that.
And it's before the fort, so be cool.
That is such a wonderful euphemism. So I should throw this out. So the copy of the book that I read was, I think, reprinted in the mid 2000s, and those illustrations were still there. So it's great to hear that they're still present in the copies of the book that are still out there.
The illustrations, the one where he's crushing the spider over the goblet.
Mm-hmm.
I would love for someone else to take a peek at it, because I only count 6 legs on the spider. And it's been making me crazy because spiders have 8 legs.
Yeah.
I can't tell. There's maybe 2 legs that I'm not seeing. Maybe they're under his thumb. So if anyone else wants to take a peek at those legs, I would love for someone to, because I only count 6 legs.
I think he's got those 2 legs palmed.
Okay. A wizard's
the illustrations
sleight of
are
hand.
certainly better than I could do, and they're not like quite first edition Dungeon Master's Guide bad, but they're really approaching it. It's like Mega Man box art kind of.
Yeah, it is a type of super goofy black and white line art that I really appreciate. Like, it didn't take away anything from this for me.
No.
Yeah, so it is very shiny. Like, he's going through. This is after the movie, so I don't know if this was King working out some other kind of angst before the angst that would come with misery. But he gets up there and he finds out that, Peter is already, kind of dangling from a thread halfway down this tower of the needle. And before he can snap the line, it snaps itself, and he falls and he falls and he falls. But Dennis and Ben have managed to pull out a cart full of these napkins in order to absorb his fall. Which,
really all about the napkins from beginning to end.
Pretty much, yeah. Like, this would not have been marketable. I think that The Eyes of the Dragon is a more marketable title for the book. Yeah, if this was called Napkins, I would have been less surprised by the way this turned out.
So I guess he was just going down the plot elements in order of importance.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah. And so, like, they're there, and everybody's alive. However implausible it might be, Flag's plan is coming to shambles, right? And this leads to a showdown inside Roland's sitting room, right, where Thomas has taken to drinking and sorrowing by himself. And they go in there trying to grab the bow and arrow that Roland used to kill this dragon. What's the name of the dragon? It's like a number or something. It's like
Niner. I think I could never knew if it was Niner or Niner.
Niner, like the radio call sign, right?
And I think they said he had a 9-chambered heart.
Yeah, was it bitter?
Oh, so bitter.
But so sweet. They can't find it.
Speaking of the Game of Thrones parallels, when Roland eats that heart and then goes and sleeps with his wife, I mean, there's so many Game of Thrones elements. Like when Ben and Naomi are going through the woods and she's got this big Anduin, like, dog descended from wolves.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of Game of Thrones elements that come up.
I've only read the first book. Should I read the others? It sounds like you're knowledgeable, and I haven't watched past the first season. Zach,
I really
I'll throw
enjoyed
this
them.
into.
I mean, honestly, with what we're talking about, if you liked Eyes of the Dragon, you're gonna love Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
I also kind of got, when she was talking about her dog, her husky or whatever, a real Cujo vibe. Because I mean, the dog talked the exact same way as Cujo does, like all caps, the girl. He didn't say, "Oh God, the bees in my head," but I mean, close enough.
Yeah.
And this is post Cujo, right?
It has to be.
Let me think here. I only know Cujo because the first Stephen King book I read was on writing. Like, I know basically the entire trajectory of King's alcoholism. Let me look this up here, because like both of those are both like mid 80s. Oh yeah, this was post Cujo, but only by a couple of years.
I see.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I feel bad for like omitting a lot of that, the resistance going through the woods, but like that is so far from the thrust of the book with kind of the three main characters.
I have to say that like Naomi and Ben and the resistance, it's some of the most poorly fleshed out characters in the book. Like we barely mentioned Ben at all, and it's largely because he's a non-entity. He's just a guy that's a friend that you can call on to put some napkins under you. I mean, we never see his emotional state. We never see anything like that. Yeah. I did think that the rebels out there, particularly because they mentioned the 80% tax rate, it reminded me of the Rolling Stones, because aren't they tax exiles from the UK? Because with what they make, their tax rate would be something like 70 or 80%. Like, I just kept picturing, like, the Rolling Stones just out in the woods, like, all right then. Yeah, you know, like...
I know the Beatles were a tax man because their effective rate was 95%, but...
Yeah, like it's like, well, these taxes are too high, so me and the Rolling Stones, my friend Ben and my friend Naomi are going to the woods.
Yeah. And those woods are called America.
Oh, God, it got too real for me. Sorry, guys, I had to back away. I like the idea of these folks who are close to the royal family coming through and saying, like, we don't want a war. Oh, my God, this is going to be terrible. If if we have to fight to kind of retake Delane, like they're looking for a third way, and I think that is very, I don't know, admirable and reasonable.
It's very British. It's not very French.
I suppose, yeah.
I guess their story arc is sort of like, things got lame and we thought we were going to have to start a rebellion, but then it turned out we didn't.
Right.
Maybe we could get a parliament.
Yeah. Well, no, it just turns out if things look bad, you just have to wait, and they'll turn out fine on their own.
Yeah, it'll be great. One or two really important men will sweep in and take care of everything for you.
Right. Everything's going to be A-okay.
Hashtag napkins.
And a badass lady with her wolf dog is going to come in. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. And so there's this final showdown with Flag in the in the sitting room where Flag, with his plan in shambles, right, is kind of revealed, like he's coming undone and revealed to be this kind of demonic entity that is always going to come back. Like Peter shows him the locket, right, and says, hey, you have been a pox on this kingdom for way too long. And Thomas, kind of like sitting there, I think like half lit, like kind of drunk, fires off the perpetually hot arrow, skewers Roland through the eye, and or not Roland, sorry, Randall Flag through the eye, and in a way that is kind of true for Flag until the very end. This causes him to kind of dissolve and unmake and transfer elsewhere, right, because of his magic.
They should have just called this like Niner the Reckoning, because again, this dragon is driving everything. Like, you kill me, I'm going to mess up your family, I'm going to ruin your kingdom, and then I'm going to shoot a wizard through the eye.
Yeah, don't kill dragons. It was the last one in the woods.
It's like Rambo First Blood, but it's like Dragon, Niner, First Blood.
Why did Brian Dennehy want to kill that dragon?
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is getting kind of comic book nerd territory, but between this and the way that the stand ends, sort of spoilery, I never really understood if the cosmology of King's World is such that like the universe is just always going to immediately create a new Flag if you manage to kill this one, or if there's actually a sort of continuity of consciousness in him.
I don't know. Like this might not actually come through for somebody who hasn't read The Stand. Like the sense that I get is that he reconstitutes, but with like barely any memory aside from the broad strokes of what he used to be, but with the same drive still in place. I think that might have been at the very, very end of the extended version of The Stand, where
that's my vibe of it too.
Yeah.
Speaking of cosmology and then things bleeding over, we've talked about how in The Gunslinger, Hey Jude is there, Jesus and things like that. I did notice towards the end of this book, so Dennis, when he's telling his story to Payne, he mentions that they listened as spellbound as children hearing the tale of the talking wolf in the Gammer's nightcap, which has to be Little Red Riding Hood, which is another kind of bleed over from our world, right? Like, it's like, Hey Jude, there's also Little Red Riding Hood in this universe.
Yeah. Like it has to be that he like phases. So if we are taking this as part of the Dark Tower, like the Dark Tower continuity, as this and the Stand kind of have to be. Like, he has to be phasing through different levels of the tower because of kind of the exalted position he has taken as part of the kind of the entourage of the Crimson King, right?
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Like, here, you're just going to wake up in a world in which that didn't happen to you.
Yeah. Like, I mean, it makes sense in a way that, like, Stephen King has engineered it to make sense even when it patently doesn't make sense, which I love. Like, it sounds like I'm criticizing it. Like, I like how fast and loose that these archetypes just kind of, like, you know, fall apart and then reappear elsewhere. Like this weird twinning thing that happens later on in the Dark Tower series. Like, it is, you know, it totally works with my sense of, like, what is satisfying about these narratives.
I did also really enjoy at the end when Peter's kind of having his all-out confrontation with Flag, where he was talking about, like, he was kind of bagging on Flag, and he's like, you know, you don't know that many tricks. You always repeat yourself, and then somebody sees through it, kind of thing. Yeah. And then because Flag missed things, forgot things, it reminded me a lot of the end of The Shining, where they forget to do the boiler. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, like, it's all brought down because, like, he forgot one small thing or didn't notice one small thing or missed something. I just thought that was another tie-in. Like, we finish up with the guy with the axe, and then we have a boiler explosion, effectively, you know, except that it's an arrow with dragon blood. Yeah.
And it's a little bit like a kid-friendly version of The End of the Stand, you know, or, you know, one part of The End of the Stand where, like, he's called out to be a charlatan, you know? Like, again, I'm very sorry if that's a spoiler. Like, it's such a long book. You're going to get there eventually. It's fine. You will forget that we ever said this.
Yeah, and it really, like, The Stand, I always say this, but the end of The Stand doesn't, like, that's not what is good about The Stand, right? It's not, like, it's not what's important about the story.
Right. Yeah. No, and, like, getting, I don't know, maybe it's because I've been listening to you for too long, Zach, but, like, getting very acquainted with King's work has gotten me kind of comfortable with the idea that, like, a really, really bad ending is not enough to you know, to kind of discount the entire work that came before it. You know, like, that has prepared me to really, really compartmentalize these things in a way that makes it satisfying, but also, like, lets me recognize that, like, the way these draw together is almost either a setup for a new work or an entirely different work in and of itself, because there has to be a last page somewhere, right?
And Eyes of the Dragon wraps up really neatly as stories go, because it doesn't, although it invokes Flag as a part of this giant sprawling larger continuity and you know, insinuates, like, it leaves a hook open for a sequel as Ben and Dennis go off in search of him. Thomas and Dennis go off in search of him. Thomas somehow being able to, like, sense that he is still around and somewhere to the south. Mm-hmm. It does end in a way that is like the way a story would end, right? As opposed to a lot of King's broader stuff, which can't really, because it kind of scoops too many things in to be able to really line them all up.
Yeah.
Would you guys say that we're just, like, one sentence away from the man in black fled across the lane and Thomas followed?
I mean, kinda.
Because, I mean, that's the way that they're setting it up, that he's going to continue to follow Flag in some form, that he's going to continue to stamp out evil, he's about to embark on a quest, he's... got a butler, just like Batman.
Of course.
Yeah, and they're mentioned in the drawing of the three, right? Roland talks about... Also, Roland Deschain, King Roland of Delane.
Yeah.
Like, but Roland talks about having met them. It doesn't really say what happened. It was just like, oh yeah, they came through here.
Yeah. Like they passed through Gilead in the kind of while Roland was there, like on a search for this figure that was passing through. You know, again, it's kind of like, I don't know what has to be this early kind of opening shot and connecting his works together. Like, this is 1984 crossing over into 1987 as he's kind of doing this. Oh, and also, like, obviously, this book, Eyes of the Dragon, is related to The Stand because Flag just straight up shows up again, you know?
Yeah, and the drawing of the three came out like a couple months after Eyes of the Dragon.
Yeah.
right? So that's, I mean, they have to have been being written at the same time.
Eyes
so
of the
I wonder
Dragon,
if it was just like...
Yeah, Eyes of the Dragon came out in 1984 in its initial
really?
pressing. Yeah, it came out in 84 as like a limited kind of printing, and the Drawing of the Three came out in 87.
And that's right. Didn't they have a bunch of trouble getting a paperback? Like the paperback came out 7 or 8 years after the hardback on the Eyes of the Dragon, right?
Again, that weird like publisher stuff. Yeah.
Oh, I guess I was younger than I thought when I got it, because I have that limited edition hardcover one. Is the one that I have. I just read this wrong. I thought that when I was trying to think, these must have been being written at the same time.
Yeah.
Eyes of the Dragon and the Drawing of the Three. He spent so much time writing the first few Dark Tower books. It seems like those were on the back burner for a really long time. That still might have been simultaneous, but the coincidence was not as great as I thought I had discovered.
Yeah.
I'll crack it open someday, guys.
Well, Cole, now that we know that he has an original, do you want to get an Ocean's 11 kind of thing together? Like, do you keep it in a safe? Like, where do you keep your original Eyes of the Dragon?
It's beat to shit. You don't want it. So,
And I wouldn't take that from you.
I used the book really well as a kid. And,
Yeah. No, it's fine. I appreciate the sentiment, Autumn. Like, and I took that as you volunteering to help me Ocean's 11 that away from Zach. But I'm happy with my copy of it. It's fine.
You're definitely the Danny Ocean, but we are going to need an explosives guy.
I suppose. Yeah, we're going to need our Don Cheadle.
I can be the explosives guy. Oh wait, I guess that doesn't.
Wait a minute, it doesn't help.
Put it back in your dad's house. We'll all go in together.
All right.
One last caper.
Yeah. So that's the way the book ends. Like, it has this little lip service to, nothing really ends happily ever after. But here's the way it goes. Ben,
except this totally did. Everybody forgot that they believed that Peter murdered his children or murdered his dad. And
yep. Yeah. So Peter takes his rightful place, quote unquote rightful place at the throne. Gosh, all hail the Crimson King. Ben marries Naomi, and then Thomas and Dennis decide, hey, we're going to go off and go after Flag on our own. And that is the very end of the Eyes of the Dragon. As much as I would like to see the chronicles of Thomas and Dennis, it is a little bit tragic knowing that they don't end up taking care of him, because Flag ends up, kind of going on and wreaking more havoc after this.
That said, I'm glad that they don't get like a cameo later where they turn out to be real important or get what they, I think it's just as well to leave that as the mysterious dangling thing that it was probably originally meant to be.
True.
I don't know. They could have shoehorned Thomas into book 7 of the Dark Tower somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, plenty of room.
While we're putting everybody else in there, why not?
I mean, that started with book 5. Don't worry. So yeah, I was very happy to dive into this. This is kind of one of the. So I never do anything if it's not for a show anymore. Like the past 5 years of my life have been basically me trying to turn my hobbies into things I could do.
Thank God you've got that podcast about eating breakfast.
Yeah,
the Eating Lunch podcast.
Yeah, the Toastcast.
Paying my taxes podcast.
Yeah. But a lot of the books that are planned for these mid-season breaks, kind of aside from the real big kind of mainstays like The Stand or It, I've never read before, and this is kind of among them. I'm very happy to have been exposed to the Eyes of the Dragon. As simplistic as it is, I think that it does lean into King's kind of strengths, and connected to the Tower or not, like this is a really good book. And aimed at kids or not, this is still a kind of a great medieval fairy tale kind of story.
And it's fantastical in the way that the Dark Tower books are, and the way that most of King's work is not.
Yes. Yeah, true. Yeah.
Even The Stand. I mean, though The Stand is probably just as connected, sort of, I don't know, cosmology-wise, it is still just like the world that you recognize.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it is not set in something adjacent to Keystone Earth, Yeah. So both of you revisited this. Autumn, how are you feeling coming away from revisiting this thing that you read as a kid?
This is in comparison to The Gunslinger, which upon a reread and thinking on it, I'd want to put in some like if I were recommending it to someone, I'd want to say, I mean, some of his views on women aren't as progressive because it was written in the 70s or like late 70s. Like this one, I think I could recommend unreservedly. I'm like, it's just a great fairy tale yarn. It's funny. It's clever. I think that I could recommend it unreservedly. I was really pleased rereading it because I think that there is maybe some element of, storycraft. There's lines that he says that are funny. There's, there's danger. There's drama. Ben Stodd's a little weak. I don't really care that much about Naomi, but otherwise, it's a solid book.
Yeah.
For me, revisiting it was, I'm reading the Dark Tower series along with the podcast, and so I reread The Gunslinger for the first time in maybe 20 years.
Oh, wow.
And unlike that, this hasn't been recontextualized by 6 more books about it coming out in the intervening time, and so it's like, all right, it was very comfortable coming back to it and like, oh yeah, I remember that weird carrot lock, and it was, I don't know, it's like, I don't know, revisiting a treasured childhood memory.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. And I'm very happy that both of you came to join me on kind of this first kind of experimental, interseason kind of episode about this kind of strange book that is very hard to get a hold of. So I see no reason why we shouldn't draw this to a close. First off, thank you so much, both of you, for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. For the listeners, a lot of you have actually came out and reviewed the show on iTunes. Lots of very nice words have been written, and I really, really appreciate them. It's fantastic to see that the show is finding an audience. Warms my heart. Not like Dragon Sands warms my heart, warms my heart like a nice thing somebody does would warm my heart. If you would like to review the show, go to iTunes. I understand it is a little bit of a hassle because iTunes kind of sucks, but it does make a big difference for this show and a bunch of the others on the network. Duckfeed.tv is the network that kind of runs this show. The show is only possible because of the support that we get on patreon.com/DuckFeed.tv. And that's all the call to action stuff I have for the show itself. We're looking forward to starting up the drawing of the 3 here in 2 weeks. It's just going to be a good time. The drawing of the 3 is great. So go ahead and buy that book and read it because it is a good time. Autumn, do you have any places where people can find you?
I do. I can be found in the Radio Free Midworld channel of the Duckfeed Slack. And because apparently I am very susceptible to peer pressure, I am now back on Twitter. Thank goodness you guys don't close out every show with using oxycodone or some sort of hard drug. But I am back on Twitter. You can find me at Mrs. Greer. That's MISSUS Greer. Mm-hmm. I love to talk about this show.
Yeah. Zach, how about you?
You can find me on Twitter at Zap Jackson. I have a video game that I've been working on for many, many years called Kingdom of Loathing, which you can find by Googling it. And my podcast, Video Games Hot Dog, at videogameshotdog.com.
Yeah.
Which, Cole, we got to have you on again one of these days.
Yeah, I would very much enjoy doing that. That would be a good time. Video Games Hot Dog gets my highest recommendation. That is a day one listen for me when I'm usually well behind on podcasts. So,
aw, you're sweet.
It's true. I'm not being sweet. It is legit my favorite thing to listen to.
No, so. I never have any backlog of any of your shows either. So right back at you, buddy.
Yeah. So until next time, there's nothing I can do but say, long days and pleasant nights.